former Trump lawyer John Eastman, now revealing that federal agents seized his phone as they investigate his role in efforts to try to overturn the 2020 presidential election here in the United States. Our congressional correspondent Ryan Nobles is joining us from Capitol Hill. So Ryan, tell our viewers what you're learning.
Yeah, that's right, Wolf. This marks an increase in the Department of Justice investigation into the former President Donald Trump and his allies' efforts to overturn the election results. They are investigating John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who was at the center of that effort to try and pressure the former Vice President Mike Pence to stand in the way of the certification of the election results. Now, Eastman is claiming in a court filing that a group of federal investigators from the Inspector General's office of the Justice Department and the FBI stopped him as he was leaving a restaurant with his wife and a friend. They searched him and then asked for access to his phone. They were able to seize the phone, and that means the information that was on that phone is part of their investigation. Now, Eastman believes that that seizure was illegal. He's complaining about it. That's how we learned of this, through a court filing. Now, Wolf, this information about the Department of Justice's interest in Eastman comes as the January 6th Select Committee, which has had a heavy focus on Eastman, has announced plans for a surprise hearing that is scheduled to take place tomorrow. You'll remember that last week, the committee had said that they were going to take a break in their hearing schedule and not pick up again until the middle of July. Well, that all changed this afternoon when they announced that they had a witness that they wanted to bring out to the public to share information about what they know about the investigation. At this point, Wolf, we do not know who that witness is, but the fact that the committee is rushing to bring this out into the light of day suggests that the information is significant. Wolf?
Is there a sense, Ryan, that this newly obtained evidence by the Select Committee could be time sensitive?
It certainly seems to have all the markings of that, Wolf. As we said before, the committee had plans to take a step back. They were collecting new information that had come in as a result of their first round of hearings. They weren't planning to have anything additionally be done in public until the middle of July, and most of the members had left town. The July 4th recess is now in effect for members of Congress, so there was no reason for them to be in Washington. We're now told that these members are making their way back to Washington, D.C. to be a part of this surprise, what many might even describe as an emergency hearing. It makes it seem as though the information that they want to deliver in tomorrow's hearing does have a degree of time sensitivity to it. Wolf?
Certainly does. It's pretty dramatic indeed. Ryan, I want you to stand by. I also want to bring in former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. He's a CNN senior law enforcement analyst, and CNN political analyst Maggie Haberman, the Washington correspondent for the New York Times. Andrew, so these FBI agents, and you're a former FBI director, the FBI agents seized Eastman's phone as he was walking out of a restaurant, made him unlock it. What does that say to you about this investigation?
Well, I mean, it's yet another signal that this investigation is well developed and it's still in a very dynamic stage. So let's remember, Wolf, that in order to get a search warrant, which they had, to seize this phone, those agents had to first go to a federal judge and convince a federal judge that they had probable cause to believe that there was evidence of a crime on that phone. The execution of that warrant on Mr. Eastman as he left a restaurant is a little bit unconventional. But let's remember, the reason getting your hands on the phone is so important right now is because we know that Mr. Eastman and others involved in this conspiracy utilized encrypted messaging platforms like Signal and WhatsApp and things like that. So the only way to get the content from those messages is to have an actual phone that the messages were sent to. So this could potentially give the prosecutors a great degree of visibility into Eastman's actual communications with other people who may have been involved in the conspiracy to overturn the election.
Yeah, it's a very dramatic. It happened on the same day last Friday that a senior Justice Department official, Jeffrey Clark, his home was raided by the FBI as well. How significant, Maggie, is all these developments? Knowing Eastman, for example, was in direct contact with then President Trump in these key moments around January 6th.
Well, look, as Andrew said, you know, this is showing that there is an active investigation involved. Where it goes remains to be seen, but the fact that there was such an aggressive step taken to get hold of this device while, according to him, he was leaving a restaurant paints quite a scene of a sense of urgency. Again, where it goes, whether it stops here, how much of a focus they're putting on former President Trump, I don't think we're going to know that for a little bit of time, but it certainly makes clear that the Justice Department has an active, at least one active investigation going going into events related to January 6th.
Certainly does. You know, Andrew, this comes as the Select Committee suddenly today added a hearing tomorrow when originally they were supposed to be taking a break until next month. So what new evidence or testimony would warrant a sudden announcement like this?
It's a great question, Wolf, and I wish I had the answer for it. But I tell you what we do know. We know that the committee's been very focused on telling a story in a compelling and engrossing way. They've done that so far. We also know that they created a fair amount of momentum with their last hearing last Thursday about the pressure that the Trump administration exerted on the Justice Department. My guess, and it's purely a guess, is that rushing this hearing onto the schedule now indicates that what they're going to present tomorrow, either in the form of evidence or witness testimony, is relative to what they presented on Thursday, a continuation of that same story. It's like they want to keep that momentum going to kind of close out this story in its finality. So that makes you think that it could be a piece of evidence relative to what we heard last week, or potentially a witness, someone who maybe was talked about at the hearing last week and now has changed their mind and decided to come in and be questioned. It's really hard to say, but I would say it's probably related directly to last week's testimony.
Could be very, very dramatic indeed. And you've done a lot of reporting on all of this, Maggie. Given the methodical way this committee, the Select Committee, has approached all this so far, are you surprised they would announce a new hearing on such short notice?
I think we all were surprised, Wolf, that they were announcing this hearing in such a dramatic fashion, and I think it'll be obviously very interesting to see what they present tomorrow. There's one other piece of information that wasn't discussed just now that the committee got hold of last week, and that is these 11 or so hours of film from a documentary filmmaker who was spending time around the Trump family and sometime around former President Trump himself in the immediate lead up to the election and then in that period afterwards. And they were looking at that piece, they were looking at all of that film, looking at the interviews. There were 3 of them that the filmmaker Alex Holder did with former President Donald Trump, and a number of interviews with some of his family members. So it also could relate to that. There are a number of options. However, this has been a very dramatic buildup, and so it will be interesting to see what emerges.
Yeah, it certainly will be, and we'll be watching every moment of that. You know, Ryan, does announcing a hearing on such short notice raise the stakes for the committee to actually deliver? You're up there on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that, Wolf. The way that this has gone down, especially when they made such a big deal about taking such a big break, raises the stakes for this hearing tomorrow. And they really do have to deliver, because a big part of what this committee is trying to do is win in the court of public opinion, and also try and convince and put pressure on the Justice Department to take action with what they've uncovered in their investigation. And I do think part of this, Wolf, is that I think the committee, to a certain extent, has been surprised by the amount of new information that has been generated by witnesses and other people who've been watching these hearings, and it's either jogged their memory or perhaps convinced them that they need to be a part of this investigation and contribute what they know. So there's also a distinct possibility that what we see tomorrow is someone who has come forward after seeing what has already taken place in these hearings and saying, I have an important piece of information to add, and I want to be a part of this. Again, Wolf, they're keeping such a tight lid on it. It is still very much a secret. We may not know until they gavel in tomorrow at 1 o'clock Eastern.
Yeah, I suspect we won't know until the hearing actually begins, but I could be wrong. Andrew, what do you make of this flurry of activity now coming from the U.S. Justice Department at the same time that the Select Committee is holding these public hearings? Is there anything to that timing?
You know, Wolf, I actually think the timing was a bit of an unfortunate circumstance for DOJ, because people are quite naturally try to link the two, the search warrant on Jeffrey Clark's home, and of course now we know about the search warrant on Eastman's phone, and it all happening right around the time of last week's hearing. It is more likely that they are just at that point in their investigation where they're ready to take some overt steps like executing search warrants, which at that point the gig is up, right? The public knows that these people are under investigation, and that signals a very profound turn in the investigation. I think that timing probably just happened to coincide with last week's hearing, but you know, we'll never know.
It's always sensitive to get a search warrant for a high-ranking former Justice Department official or for the president's lawyer in this kind of matter. That's not an easy decision to make for the Justice Department.